So tell me, Alvaro, can you describe your leadership style, your view on transactional and transformational style, their impact on employee self-determination, and I'm also interested to get your insight regarding intrinsic and extrinsic motivation of employees from your experience as a leader.
Okay, Gail, thanks very much for the opportunity to chat here about that. Yeah, I've been a manager and leader, technical leader for probably around over 20 years now, and a people manager specifically for well over 10. So I would say that my style is more participative than autocratic. So I tend to elicit kind of people's intrinsic desires and what rewards them to help motivate them to do the work, rather than demanding, what we need precisely and then measuring people harshly on their outcomes. So I guess transactional for me is it's very much looking at objectives, agreed objectives, and then measuring people based on them, and they get rewards or bonuses or salary increases depending on how they reach the objectives. Now that is really important, and of course I always employed a lot of that content or a lot of that technology to manage, because you have to be very careful to manage by objectives and to look at results. However, what really motivates people, or what I found really got the best results from people, is much more the, probably what you might say, transformational or kind of participative style of management, where you, for me, one of the key things would have been to focus people in working on things that met or fit their talents. So I think GALLUP worldwide has been very successful with strengths-based leadership. I remember reading a book in my first weeks as a manager, and it was called First Break All the Rules, and it was all around the strengths-based leadership. So focus people on work which fits their areas of talent, and then they will get much more satisfaction. You will, as a manager, will get much more opportunity to recognize them, which is extremely important for the achievements they have had, and it results in a much happier workforce. And it's surprising the number of managers that you do see that divvy out work or separate out work to people without a strong view on what work best fits which individuals. So I think that's something I was very strong on over the years, and it enables intrinsic kind of value to be seen by the employee. So rather than the rewards like bonuses, etc., when you put people on things that really leverage their talents, they can soar and they can get some really great results. And that is, of course, hugely satisfying to them, but also to the business. So while I was very focused as a manager on engaging employees, talking with them, rewarding them verbally, which often is more important than financially, equally the business is the bottom line. But I found that the beauty was by using the right style, focusing on the people's talents, rewarding them, giving them things that they could excel at, the business benefited and the people. So it's a virtuous circle, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Eva. Where your leadership style actually start, you mentioned about transactional now, transformational now. Where really did you start as a leader from a style standpoint in the early days? Because it seemed to be that you have developed your leadership style. So from A to B, how did you achieve that and what it was?
Right, well, that's a good question. So I would have transformed over the years, certainly, but you're right though that when I went into that actual management role, I already had 15 years of leadership in various roles before that. So my style had been formed quite a long time before, even though I would have enhanced or changed it. So I think for my very first years as an engineer working with teams, I always respected a style that would be tough but fair. So I came across managers who were all tough, looking at objectives without always being wise about those objectives. And sometimes I could see scenarios where people were overly rewarded for certain objectives, and they might have been more politically expedient to the manager than really delivering value to the business. And then I also saw managers who were excellent with people, who always seemed to be able to judge the value right and always seemed to be able to involve the employees more and then get them much more engaged and much more productive. So watching in those early years the best performing managers, I picked up on a lot of that style that I described to you, but again it would have evolved over the years. The other thing is leadership is a little different than management. So for me, I was most of my career a technical leader, and leaders really need to give a vision to the team. They really need to show that there's something big to be aimed for and articulate that. So it's less about rewards, certainly extrinsic rewards, and much more about intrinsic. So to give a vision of where we need to go and to show why it's compelling that we need to get there, but as a team, not as just individuals, that the goal again is not for the business alone or for the corporate mothership, but it's the goal for us as a team to perform and excel, and then we'll all win. And likewise, always reward the people on the team, even as a leader, not a manager, verbally, casually, authentically, offline or publicly. Reward them verbally for what they've done. I mean, celebrate wins. That was always huge to me. So I guess to try and be a bit more brief, the participative style of engaging everyone and bringing everyone in to a team spirit was always big for me, even before I became a manager. And on the flip side, I'd have to say, when there are major quality issues or the business is at stake, I can switch what I believe they call situational leadership to a very severe style and a quite aggressive style. The beauty of that is it becomes very effective in serious situations, because all of the people who respect you for being a good manager and fair, when you get much more aggressive and serious and severe, they recognize that, okay, things are different now. Ivor is behaving very strongly and the humor has dropped. This is serious. So you can actually get a result just from changing your style dramatically, which I've often used in the past.
Okay, thank you, Ivor. So, have you had experience where you had managed or lead people who had zero motivation, or how did you deal with those people?
Right, that is the challenging one for any manager. Some managers actually have a laissez-faire style, and with people like that who are emotive, you really have a problem on behalf of the business, because people like that just drift, and they'll be happy to drift. I have had not too many over the years as a percentage terms, but of course we have people like that. What I generally try to do is even more so find something that does turn them on. Now I guess the extreme people care about nothing, but in general those people, if they are given a role that appeals to their self-esteem or their self-interest, you know, you can begin to draw them out. So that is one ploy that I would use. Target them on things that they actually like, or at least are as close to what they like doing or are talented at as possible. And then maybe give a lot of support and kind of acknowledgement when they do well at those, but also bring up that their overall performance in other areas is not so good, but not too critical. So when you inherit someone like that, and often I inherit someone like that, you have to play them carefully. You know, give them what suits them, give them rewards verbally for when they do well, and accentuate like the good behaviors we're seeing, and basically coax them along, I guess. In most cases, other thing I'd add is the personal relationship and the personal rapport. Many of these people have had bad relationships with managers and have built a bad name for themselves. So if you come along and you actually appear to be much more reasonable as a manager, and you appear to be actually encouraging and not just out to criticize them, you can often get an early purchase on them and then coax the relationship along and bring the horse to water, if you will. It won't always work, but I've found that I've been relatively, compared to other managers, quite successful in bringing along people of that type. with the tools I mentioned and some more. But it's still always a challenge for a leader or a manager, because sometimes people like that, if they're really intransigent and difficult, they can begin to pull the team down. And this is a really big problem with those people, if they begin to take people who are working hard and engaged and make those people feel like, hey, you know, X is doing nothing. So it's a situation that the best managers deal with very well, and it's an important one to be able to deal with. And people who are really, really difficult and will not respond to what I described, you have to switch to performance management and maybe switch a little more to severe type behavior.
Okay, thank you, probably one more question. I think you have provided a lot of information already, but I just want to expand a little more on the intrinsic. So the extrinsic, as you mentioned, it's pretty straightforward. In terms of the intrinsic, I'm very interested to know. So you had a lot of engineers under your leadership. Do you think that those people who are already intrinsic leader can make them more intrinsic? Is there something like be even more intrinsic or be extra intrinsic?
Yeah, well, that's actually, I think so, very much so, and actually it touches on what we talked about earlier. I would have been very focused on intrinsic even early on, maybe a decade before I became a people manager, and I have had up to 26 direct reports, engineers mostly and technicians. They're smart people and you can be pretty busy when you have that many. But yeah, my earlier experience, I would feel that I grew over the years, and even in my first few years as a manager, I tend to say to people, unless you've done management for around 10 years, you can't say you've really optimized or leveled out. So I think from the early years of management right through to maybe 10 years in, I was enhancing that ability to draw out people and to accentuate their intrinsic value that they perceived. So later, what would I have added later? I would have done what I described to you even better, but I would have added more kind of group offsites that were really good, that fostered team spirit and enhanced the individuals feeling that they were doing something for a team, an esprit de corps, if you will. That's something I focused on more later. So rather than doing offsites where people do bowling and they all go out, they have some drinks, they go back, we organised ones out in the Dublin mountains. We did treks, we did treasure hunts, we did meals in good restaurants at very good value though for the company by getting block bookings. We also went sailing. We had one guy in our team who was a sailing enthusiast, and he got the whole 20 of us out sailing in the bay in multiple boats. So it sounds like maybe a trite thing, but it was actually just one of the enhancers to get this team spirit. If you combine that then with the people on the team who are difficult or more difficult, of resolving their issues and difficult relationships, resolving those, and focusing people on where their talents will shine, even if they're limited talents. And you do all of this together synergistically and have the good rapport with the employees, and when the chips are down, have them see that you will stand by them. And I will mention one more thing that was very important to me. I did a Stanford course a few years ago on leadership and entrepreneurial management, and it was very good, but one thing they talked about were the different powers that a leader or a manager has. And one of them for me was very special, and it was called referent power. And referent power, I'm sure you know, but for anyone watching, referent power is the power you have to influence based on your personal capabilities. So for instance, in my case, I was a technical leader in problem solving and technical complex issues. So I had huge kudos for that and reputation. So people on your team who do that work and who fancy themselves as being good at it, they really respect you because they know you're the person for that. And it gives you a referent power. In any difficult interactions or problems with those people, they are conscious that you are not just a people manager. You understand the technical breadth and depth hugely, and they have a respect for it. And that's another thing. When you, as that person of great power in the technical sphere, as a manager, when you reward them and acknowledge them when they've done well in that, it means a lot more for their intrinsic value. So it's just an extra thing I thought of there.
Yeah, no, I think that's very good. From my standpoint, I think you bring a lot of new insight to this research. Do you have anything else that you want maybe to add, a story or anything that you think that you did not cover during this 70 minutes of interview?
Yeah, Gail, well, I think, no, I probably brought, nothing springs to mind that's a massive missing anyway, but I'm sure I'll think of many things. No, just to say I wish you the very best of luck with this endeavour, and looks like you're doing a great job. Thank you,
Thank you
Gail.
very much. Thank you.